Hello and welcome back for another Torah Tuesday. Today we're in Exodus 12, beginning in verse 8. And today we're going to talk about the method of cooking and the method of eating and the meaning of the word Pāsaḥ in Hebrew. Beginning in verse 8, they shall eat the meat on this night, roasted with fire and flatbread. Over bitter greens they shall eat it. Do not eat from it raw or cooked by boiling in water, rather roasted with fire, its head, its forelegs, and its inner parts. Do not leave any of it until morning. What remains until morning you shall burn with fire. Like this you shall eat it, with your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your walking stick in your hand. You shall eat it in a hurry. It is Yahweh's Pāsaḥ. I will cross through the land of Egypt on that night. I will strike every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal. On all the gods of Egypt I will make judgments. I am Yahweh. The blood will become your sign upon the houses where you are. I will see the blood and protect you. No affliction will be upon you to destroy you when I attack the land of Egypt. Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here. We'll dive right in. There are some specific cooking instructions for those celebrating the Passover. First of all, they're supposed to roast the animal rather than boil it. Why roasting? Well, roasting would be more practical if you're traveling through the wilderness. So they're not in the wilderness yet, but they're about to go into the wilderness. They're going to live there for quite some time. So perhaps there's an element of practicality here. Bringing along great big pots for boiling is not practical, but roasting over an open fire would be more practical. The text doesn't say why to roast rather than boil, but that might be a factor. Also, when you roast an animal, you're roasting it intact. The entire animal is being cooked at once, which might be an important part of the symbolism of the unity that this sacrifice or this meal is supposed to bring to the family and to the community. God doesn't want them cutting it in pieces and parts might be lost. He wants the animal to be cooked whole. He wants the community to leave Egypt whole as a unit. They are not supposed to eat it raw. So eating raw meat would violate the later prohibition against eating blood. So already here, they're ensuring that the blood is cooked. The blood is, of course, drained out first for painting on the doorposts. But to eat it raw, there might be some blood left over in the animal. So yes, they're supposed to hurry for this sacrifice, but still make sure that the animal is cooked thoroughly. But why not boil? A couple of possibilities for why they're not supposed to boil the animal. One, we've already mentioned that boiling would require them to cut it up into pieces, and there's a sense of wholeness to this sacrifice. Also, if you boil an animal, some of the flavor leaves the meat and goes into the water, and so perhaps this is ensuring that they're eating all of it, none of it is lost or wasted. This is a sacred meal. We don't want any of it to get dumped out. There's also a possibility that Cassuto mentions in his commentary that to eat half-boiled flesh was part of another ancient rite, an ancient ritual, and so God is wanting to separate what his people are doing as compared to these other ancient rituals. There's a potential contradiction in Deuteronomy 16, verse 7, that some people have pointed to as a contradiction with Exodus 12, because there the people are told to bashal and eat it. And bashal is the word that means boil in Exodus 12. The way I understand these to be harmonized is that bashal covers a wide range of cooking methods. Any kind of cooking could be bashal. And Exodus 12 verse 9 specifies that they're not to bashal it with water. That is, to cook it with water is to boil it. So that's how I understand those two to act together, or to fit together. There are not just cooking instructions in this passage, but we also heard some eating instructions. They're supposed to eat it with flatbread. We'll talk about flatbread in another video. They're supposed to eat it with bitter herbs. As we'll see in a future video, the point of flatbread is that You haven't leavened it and let it rise. They didn't have time to let their bread rise. They needed to eat in a hurry. So that's why they're eating flatbread. The bitter herbs seem to be symbolic of the bitterness of their time in Egypt. The same word bitter is used in Exodus 1:14 to describe their servitude to Pharaoh. Later Jewish writings actually make this connection between the bitter herbs and the bitter service explicit. The Mishnah mentions it in Pāsaḥ 10:5. So they're supposed to eat the whole animal. Nothing is to be wasted. This is a sacred meal and it's communal, and so everybody participates, and nobody should go hungry. There's a dress code for this particular dinner party, and the dress code is to gird up their loins and eat with their sandals on their feet. They're supposed to be ready for action and ready for travel. This would be, of course, significant at the first Passover meal because they're literally getting ready to leave Egypt. But every generation after this that celebrates the Passover meal is supposed to dress as though they were the Israelites in Egypt getting ready to leave. It generates a sense of anticipation and makes it feel more real that they're celebrating the exit from Egypt. How do you gird up your loins? Well, if you're wearing a long tunic with long skirts, which both men and women would have been wearing, then to gird up your loins is to gather up the skirts and tuck it in your belt so that you can have easier movement. If you've ever tried to run fast or walk fast with a long flowing skirt, you know, long skirts are not conducive to quick movement. So to gird up your loins is to fold it up and tuck it in your belt so that you can move more quickly. They're supposed to eat in a hurry. The word for in a hurry is chapaz, and Pāsaḥ is the name of the meal, so it's like the same sounds in reverse. So we need to talk now about the name of this meal, the Pāsaḥ. Usually it's called Passover in English, but I'm not convinced that that's actually the best translation of the word, because although it's possible that it means to pass over, usually we picture it in English as the destroying angel is passing over the homes of those who've painted the blood on their doorpost. But actually Yahweh is the one who says he's going to be Pasaching. And although Yahweh is both the killer and the protector in this story, he is the one who is enacting the death penalty for those who've rebelled against him and failed to recognize his sovereignty. He's also the one protecting those who are rightly related to him. So I think that protect is actually a better way of understanding the meaning of the word Pāsaḥ. That is, this is the protection meal rather than the Passover meal. And Isaiah 31:5 is a really good example. Just as birds hover, so Yahweh of armies defends Jerusalem. To defend, he rescues. To Pāsaḥ, he delivers. So if we understand Pāsaḥ there as to pass over, then it's a little odd. To pass over, he delivers doesn't work in Isaiah 31:5. The point is protection from attack. It's parallel to his defense of Jerusalem in the previous line. So to protect, he delivers, is how I would render that. The word occurs in noun form in Exodus 12 in verses 21, 27, 43, and 48, and it occurs in verb form in verses 13, 23, and 27. So it occurs a lot in this passage, and again, throughout the passage, I think it makes the most sense to understand it as protection, or Yahweh protects. Verse 13 indicates that the blood on the doorpost is a sign, using the same word for sign that's used for the other signs and wonders in Egypt that Yahweh has done. Here the people are participating in enacting a sign. The sign is going to be, in the morning, the houses that have the blood will not have anyone dead inside, and the houses without the blood will. Because persistent and intractable rebellion against Yahweh merits judgment. That is the sad ending of a long series of strikes against Egypt in which the Egyptian people as a whole failed to respond to Yahweh and to recognize his superiority over Pharaoh and the gods of Pharaoh. This passage indicates that God is going to bring judgment against the gods of Egypt. It's interesting that rather than claiming these gods don't exist, The book of Exodus instead presumes the existence of Egyptian gods and declares and demonstrates Yahweh's superiority to them. The gods of Egypt are unable to protect their people when Yahweh comes against the nation. They're powerless. So those who've thrown their lot in with these gods as their source of protection and source of provision are going to be sorely disappointed. And those who have turned to Yahweh for protection and provision will be the victors. Just a little note about what's coming at the end of this chapter. In verse 38, we're told that when the Hebrews left Egypt, a mixed multitude went up with them. So there were apparently Egyptians who signed on and said, I think Yahweh is the most powerful God, and I'm going to obey his commands. And Egyptians and perhaps other peoples who lived in Egypt from other nationalities, other ethnicities. And so I think we have a glimpse of this possibility of joining the people of Israel for those who recognized Yahweh's superiority. Sadly, most of them did not. So that brings us partway into the instructions on the Passover, or the Pāsaḥ, the Feast of Protection. We will look at the next chunk of instructions next week. I hope this has been illuminating for you. Please tell your friends about this if you think they would benefit as well, and have a great week.